everyone! For today's video I wanted to focus on how to conceal our under eye area and make our eyes look brighter. So if you're interested in seeing how I do that, then keep on watching. Okay, so this video is going to cover two main issues that I see when we're trying to cover up our under eye bags and address certain issues, and then two tools that you can use to address those issues. The two issues I see most often and get questions about most often are texture and discoloration. Texture is an issue you might not have. Not everybody has a texture issue around their eyes, but some people like myself have some, bumps that appear over here. You might get some puffiness and you might have fine lines or wrinkles, which I'm also lumping into the texture category. So if you have any of that, the best way to address it is one, to hydrate your under eye. Obviously, everybody should be using a moisturizer and an eye cream. But the second thing that you can do to address that issue is to use a primer of some sort. I really like pore filling primers. These are the two that I use the most often. I tend to gravitate towards the Professional primer just because it has a bit of a color in it as well. So it also helps to sort of calm down some redness or, darker areas. So I already have my base makeup on, but before I do any sort of complexion product, I put the primer all over my face, including in this area here under my eye, where there are some bumps and fine lines, to smooth that out. The second issue that I see talked about a lot online is discoloration and how to sort of address that. And most of the time, people try to address that with color correction first before applying any other product. In my opinion, color correcting is completely skippable. I prefer to use higher coverage products and, sort of manipulate my makeup in other ways to be able to get the coverage I want and the color correction I want. You can even do color correction with powder. It doesn't necessarily need to be a step that you take before any other products. But if you are interested in going in with a color corrector before your concealer, one thing that I will say is that I see people use color correctors that are not made for their skin tone all the time. Generally, if you're using a color corrector to address something like dark spots here or acne spots, if you're putting it on before your base makeup, you should not see it once it's blended out. For under eye darkness, a lot of the time I see people use like a salmon colored color corrector to try to address the darkness under their eyes. And for someone like me, you would lean probably more towards like a pale peach or a pale yellow to correct the darkness under my eyes. I often just use yellow. Um, I often don't use anything at all. Maybe if I'm really tired, I might use a yellow, but often what I do is just reach for a more yellow concealer, and then maybe if it's too yellow with the rest of my makeup, I might try to tone that down with a peach powder just to balance everything out. And both of those products would be color correcting, but the color correction itself is not something you would be able to notice on my face really easily. It's just something that more for myself, when I use it, I'll choose a yellow and I'll notice it, and so I'll have to sort of tone it down later on a lot of the time if I'm looking for like that extra bit of coverage, but a lot of the time I'm not. So depending on your skin tone, you might need to use a pale pink or even a green if you're very fair, and you might be leaning towards a salmon or like a persimmon colored color corrector if your complexion is on the darker side. But generally, if you blend it out, you should not see it before going in with your foundation and concealer. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's talk about coverage. I tend to lean towards pro products that are high coverage. A lot of the time, I'll just choose a foundation or a base product, not necessarily a concealer. This is the one I'm currently using. And there are products that you can get at Sephora that kind of do the same thing. I know MAC has, like a face pen that has really high coverage that I use as a concealer. Clinique also has a foundation concealer combo. You don't necessarily need to use a concealer to be able to cover your under eye or spot conceal. I think when it comes to actually applying the cover products to our face, what we need to think about are the color, the coverage, if it's going to last all day, how it's going to hold up with flash photography. And for all those reasons, that's why I tend to like pro products, because they kind of already have all that built in. Like a lot of them are skin like, a lot of them are buildable to really high coverage, a lot of them are made for flash photography or photos or film. So that's the reason I like the RCMA makeup, is because all that stuff is out of the way, and then I know that it's buildable enough that if I want a sheer coverage, I can sheer it out, and if I want high coverage, I can get it there. So as you can see, I've used two of these colors already. Those are like my general base. The three in the middle actually are probably my general base makeup. A lot of the time I'm in between these colors. But something I think that we don't do well is strategically place our concealer so that we get the most out of it. A lot of the time online, you'll see people place it here and here. I don't know why we're putting it here. No one, unless you're 13, should be putting it there because a lot of the time that does more disservice to us and our makeup than it does any good. And it also really accentuates wrinkles, and you can brighten that area up in other ways. So I like to focus my concealer over here and slowly blend it out towards like the middle to end. Another thing with placing your concealer here and here is that sometimes it's not really blended out well, and in flash photography, you could see a little gray bit over here where people didn't necessarily blend out. So I think it's really important to place it where you need the most coverage and very softly blend it out so that it fades nicely. So I've just grabbed a little bit on a fluffy brush, and I'm going to start where there is the most discoloration, and I'm going to blend it outward and upward. If any of you are familiar with Katie Jane Hughes, she says to not bring your concealer all the way up here because it makes your eye look like a squid. I'm kind of with that. I just kind of like to use my discoloration as eyeshadow when I can, but I also think that it's a lot of work to sort of mitigate that later if you brought it right up to the lash line. And you can just grab as much or as little product as you want. If you want to warm it up on your hand as well ahead of time, you can do that. But I'm just going straight in and sort of taking that where I need the most coverage here, and then I'll slowly blend it out. I'm not really putting any product over here where you really would see a lot of that, Instagram concealer. I'm going to blend it out here first because I do have a little blemish, so I'm going to bring some coverage there. I'm going to slowly bring it up towards the lash line, and I'm also going to address any discoloration on the inner corner and eyelid as well. This also makes a nice primer for your eyeshadow. You need to blend it out a little more. I tend to take it around my eyebrow if it's like a little too bright. Okay, and there you go. If you have something like a fat pad or something that or a part of your under eye bag that pops out a little bit more than the rest, you can go in with an even lighter colored concealer. This is typically where I would leave my concealer, even though I do have, that sort of pocket here that pops out a little bit more and a dip more here. If I wanted to address that dip on a client, especially if that dip maybe goes around, sometimes as we're aging, the eye bag might sort of start protruding here and also here. So if that were happening on a client, I would just go in where there is that dip with a color that's a little bit lighter and sort of just start placing it where there is that darkness and that shadow. So this color is 2 shades lighter now, just a little bit. And like some people, when they smile, even that line may continue. If it does continue, just take it onto your cheek and blend it out later. And then I would just take that same brush and go in and blend it out. I'm not going to use a swiping motion. I'm just going to pat it down so that it's nice and blended with the other color. And that should be able to create enough brightness so that we don't see the shadow anymore. And this should offer enough coverage that we don't really need any color correcting products. But if you did need a color correcting product, or if you did need something to further smooth out your skin, powders are a great option that I feel like a lot of people don't really talk about as a functional product other than mattifying and setting. But I think powders are really great for smoothing out the skin tone and adding extra color or color correction if we need it. So I'm going to be using the MAC Studio Fix Pro Set and Blur. This is the powder I use all over my face, but I think it's particularly good under the eye for that added coverage and that added blurring effect. Just taking it on a fluffy brush because I don't like too much powder, and I'm going to look up and just allow it to get into all the creases, crevices, and set down. Okay, so here is where I would leave my concealer most of the time. And you can see the difference already. I've used 2 products, 3 products if you count the primer, but you could see there's quite a lot of brightness happening on this side instead of this side, and I'm looking a lot more youthful and alive. So coverage was the first tool you can use to sort of mitigate any concerns you have with your under eye area. The second tool that I think nobody talks about is balance. And what I mean by that is we need to balance our features and think about this area of our makeup the same way we think about our contour and our highlight and our complexion. And so why is that important when considering covering up an under eye or minimizing the appearance of our under eye bags? Well, because if you contour this area correctly, you could end up having an eye bag that looks significantly smaller than if you just focused on concealer and, let's say, like mascara, or didn't really consider what you were doing with your eyeshadow at all. So if you're familiar with contouring, you know that you're adding darkness and light to certain features of your face to make them look bigger or smaller or bring them forward or back. If you're familiar with my how to contour a square face video, you know that we contour here so that our face looks slimmer and smaller. That same idea is going to apply to our under eye area or eye bag area, but instead of, just using more concealer products or more under eye products, we're actually going to use eyeshadow to make that eye bag area look smaller, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just going to take like a normal contour shadow and start my eyeshadow off with that color. So starting off at the under portion of my eye, bringing this also into the crease, it's going to be my base color for my eyeshadow. And I basically do my eyeshadow like this almost every single day. It's just a good way to get some definition, have it sort of match the rest of your makeup. I also put some like blush in here as well, but contour shade is like a good way to just add some definition and also minimize the appearance of your eye bag. So I'm going to bring this, once there's less on the brush, I'm going to bring it pretty far around the eye bag. I like a really blown out makeup look, so I can bring this color quite far up and down and quite far out. You might be a little different. You might not even need to drag your eyeshadow down so low if your eye bag is really not taking up that much of space on your face, but mine is quite big and it's dragged down quite a lot onto my cheeks, so I'm just going to keep adding color to help minimize it. So already you can see, if I were using like this brush, let's say, as a measuring tool, you can see that my eye bag on this eye takes up from under my lash line up until pretty well about where the brush bristles end, because here is the end of my eye bag, right? But if we look at this side with the eyeshadow, we don't really count the eye bag from here. We kind of count it from under the eyeshadow, meaning it's taking up about half the brush's bristle length rather than the full bristle length. Do you know what I mean? And as you add eyeshadow and intensify your eye look, the appearance of your eye bag becomes even more and more minimal. So I'm going to continue doing an eye look, and you'll be able to see what I mean by that when it's done. I'm just going to use this MAC Connecting Color eyeshadow palette in an unfiltered nudes, and I'm just going to like continue to do my eyes with this. Let's try some of this. This is a really dark deep brown, but let's see. Yeah, very dark brown. But let's see if we can intensify this outer corner. And as we intensify the outer corner as well, if you're going to do like a winged liner or more heavy eyeshadow on the outer corner, that's actually going to bring even more attention away from this area, which is, the side of our eye closer to the middle of our face, where a lot of us have that problem with our under eye, where we want to take attention away or we want to do more color correcting or coverage. But having an eye look that has a lot of drama on the outer corner visually brings everyone else's eye away from the eye bag. Do you know what I mean? So you're not actually going to be looking at the eye bag, you're going to look at the makeup holistically, or even just the outer portion of the eye shadow as well. And no one's really going to be noticing your under eye, to be honest. If you can plan your makeup around a strategy like this one, where you're playing with color, you're also playing with light and shadow, you're playing with placement so that the areas or the features that you're less comfortable with on your face are emphasized less, I think that's going to take you a lot farther than finding a product that's the most full coverage or the most pigmented will. If you find that you want to bring this down a little bit or just cover up, an imperfection here, you can also take your blush up high and sort of just like address any issues you have with the corner of your eye here by adding blush. I think that's a really good trick to use that doesn't involve you using any like full coverage concealers or harsh products or thick products that are going to emphasize like wrinkles and textures, but it is a way to, again, minimize the appearance of something without you having to use more products or use aggressive products. I think this eyeshadow is pretty much done. I'm going to add in some pink shimmer just over here. It's not a really intense eye look, it's just something that's drawing your attention away from this area. You know what I mean? And I'm not putting heavy sparkle in here because I'm going to put liner and maybe another color in the crease, and that's going to help draw our attention again over to this side of our face rather than in the middle where we have the eye bags that maybe we don't want to draw attention to. I think I'm moving on now to just doing my general makeup. Just taking a liner and gonna do a wing, but I'm gonna do it with brown liner so it's a little softer. I'm gonna take that on the outer corner as well. And then there's a little smudger on the back that I'm gonna use to help build out the wing and smudge this out to make it soft. So hopefully as I'm building out this eye look, you can understand the concept where when we add contour and light or, different elements of makeup to draw our attention over to a different side of our face or a different feature, we are minimizing the appearance of the under eye. And I hope you can see the difference. There's no mascara. This eye look is not necessarily finished, but there's a clear difference in how much space the eye bag is taking up on this side versus how much it's visually taking up space on this side. Okay, so this is the eye look fully complete with mascara, and you can definitely see the difference in how tired this eye looks compared to this one. And I really didn't do anything to this side that was like brightening or covering. We did our concealer and that was that. We went over some products that were good to use for general coverage, but what really took it to the next level was us doing the rest of our makeup and minimizing the appearance. So some other things that you can do if you're still wanting to cover something up, or sometimes I find people still want like a little bit of brightness here. That's fine. If you didn't add your concealer there, which I still strongly believe you shouldn't, you can just grab a little bit of highlighter, and when you're applying your highlighter, just bring it into this little corner here. And not everyone needs to do this. For my face shape, I probably do need to do this because my cheekbone kind of goes inwards here. There's a good chance that the bone here is casting a shadow. It's going to look dark on me, but I still refuse to put concealer because it'll emphasize wrinkles. So what I do instead, if I'm feeling like I really just need an extra bit of coverage, is I'll take whatever highlighter I'm using and I'll just sort of bring it up into this corner. And that will start to fill out that area and bring it out and make it look brighter. And it's just a nice way to brighten up your outer corner without using like loads of heavy product. Something else people can do to add extra emphasis to the outer corner is add a bit of color in the crease as well. I just have a little bit of like a blue purple that I'm going to add. And I'm not going to try to take this. This is on a really, really fluffy brush. But I'm not going to try to take this all the way over. I'm actually just going to keep it in the crease as much as I can. And hopefully that color matches well enough with the rest of the eyeshadows that it doesn't stand out too much, but that it does its job. So the purple is like an eggplant color, right? So it's not like bright, but it is just like a little extra detail that brings your eye over a little bit more to the outer corner and less towards the inner corner. And I could have done this with blush, I guess. Like I could have gone a little heavier on the blush, but it is what it is at this point. Some other things that you could do if you really wanted to add more emphasis to your eye look or to brighten up your eyes further is to use a skin tone pencil on the waterline or use eye drops to sort of make your eyes look whiter and brighter. Those are two things I do quite frequently, especially if I look very tired or if I in fact am very tired. They really help to sort of like brighten everything up, make everything look fresh. And again, it's something you could do that doesn't add more product to your under eye. And the reason why I'm emphasizing all of these different tools and techniques and products that don't have anything to do with color correctors or concealers or extra powders or, whatever, is because I think that this area gets a lot of attention, but for the wrong reasons. I think we tend to pile up the product in this area, and what that ends up doing is making that area look cakey, look dry, emphasizing wrinkles, emphasizing texture, all of the things that we don't really want. But there really hasn't been anything online that I've seen that has taught anyone how to avoid that and how to do something different that achieves the result that we're expecting, but by not having any of those negative effects as well. All right, so those are my tips on how to cover up your under eye area and how to make your eyes look brighter with makeup. I hope that you enjoyed this video and learned something new today, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.